Storyhinge, Episode 48, Bradford Rogers, Keep Sailing.
About that time, I made that decision that I really want to focus on quality of life and enjoying it because, no telling what could happen the next day or next week.
Welcome to Storyhinge, where we unfold more meaning and value in everyone's personal story. At Storyhinge, we explore foundational ideas and beliefs through diverse personal stories in order to discover more meaningful paths, greater happiness, and accelerated growth in one's life. We believe everyone has a beautiful story to grow. Now here's your host, Jason Vadari.
All right, so excited today again here on Storyhinge. Today we have on Bradford Rogers. Now Bradford comes with an interesting background. He's a multi-instrumentalist, an engineer, a singer, a composer, owner of an independent label called World Song Media. And in my fellow realm, he's also a podcaster of a podcast called the Multimedia Ninja. And among other things, to throw on top of all that, he's also a sailor. So Bradford, welcome to Storyhinge.
Thanks, Jason. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm excited to hear about this diverse background and kind of some of your history and where you got to where you're at today.
Sure.
So I don't know, maybe we'll take back to maybe a significant moment in your past that kind of maybe led you to where you're at today. Why don't we hit that first and see where that takes us?
All right, we won't go to the most significant event in my recent past, which is the hurricane, the second hurricane.
Yep, I know I'm in Houston and you're in Atlanta, and so we're both enjoying the hurricanes of this season.
Yeah. I guess one of the most significant things, though, just off the top of my head, though, was around 2011, 2012, I joined the Recording Academy. Actually, I might have joined a little earlier than that, and don't know why that just came to me, but that is probably one of the most significant decisions other than learning how to play an instrument reasonably well and knowing some music theory and stuff that I've done. So not long after I joined, I actually ran for a governorship with the Atlanta chapter. And that has just led me to meet so many people, including the TK, Tom Kidd, that mixed the last record I produced, and just a lot of people I might eventually have run into, but probably would have taken me a lot longer to. And just a great group of people and close friends now. That's probably a turning point. And I think attending podcast movement more recently, but going back a few years, I'd say the Recording Academy.
Okay. And now, has music always been a part of your life? And I see all the different music things you've been doing.
Yeah. So since I was I could say probably since close to when I was born, but we got a Wurlitzer, what do you call them? A fun center or whatever you used to call those little organs with the cha-cha beats and the stuff and on there. And we had one of those in our home. And when I was about 4, my dad, who is born in 1929, he just wrote a book called Depression Baby. So that's what he is. And he played trombone back then and for a while. And so when I was about 4, he helped pick out the Star Spangled Banner on the organ by ear for me. And that was my first musical thing. And then I wanted to take lessons. I actually wanted to play the pipe organ at church, and I was way too young. So I started taking piano, and my first piano lessons were, instead of sheet music and staves, we had these little books, and they would have songs called The Rocket, and it would just have pictures of the black notes on the keyboard, and you'd go doom 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 doom. Great stuff like that. And then finally I got into actual sheet music and got in the band in grade school with trumpet, and sort of kept going from there.
Okay. No, at that young age, did you think about that music would be part of your future all along the way, or was it just something you were doing at the time?
Yeah, it was strangely, no, I was probably not encouraged to do that for a career, which may be wise. There's been some transitions back and forth on that. So that's maybe something of interest, but at the time, no. And I guess I might as well go ahead and share. You can just stop me if it doesn't help, but I think it's interesting. A lot of my musical friends, and I've been professional musician technically since I was 15, when we played a John Glenn senatorial non-victory party in Atlanta. That was my first professional gig with the band Signals. But it on and off since then, there was a period for a while where I thought, like a lot of my musical friends, and whatever I need to do as far as gigs, as long as I'm earning my money from music, that's where I want to be. And then after a while, maybe around 2000-ish, I had done some corporate band stuff and which paid better, but was still a lot of work, and I didn't find it real soulful. And I'd done some touring and original band and cool stuff that didn't pay much at all, but was more fun and gratifying. And I finally got to a point around 2000 where I decided, instead of saying whatever it is, as long as it's music, how about I get a regular gig to pay the rent, and then I can say no to any musical gigs I don't want to take. And that has been a really powerful experience for me, and I'm still kind of sticking with that one.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, all of it's interesting how maybe we'll go back a little further first and say and ask you, as you're thinking about that future and you decide that you want that music to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I hear that, and that probably resonates with a lot of people out there saying, kind of the idea, I want to stick with something I really love to do and make that my career. Now, it sounds like you were able to do that. Give us some insight on how you're able to do that, and maybe some of the challenges, the upsides, and maybe some of the downsides of going down that path.
Yeah, I found prior to 2000, I did not have a lot of extra money. I guess I don't know. I started around college age, being in bands professionally and that sort of thing, which I'm not sure I want to divulge how many years ago that was, but I'm substantially older than that now. And so we used to do these cover band things, and we thought that was cool. And we'd go on back then what we called tours, but basically they were just playing dumps and around the Southeast and stuff for in very sketchy and low-paying situations. And and then I got back from some of that. I did start college, and I went to UGA, University of Georgia, for about a semester or less. And then I quit to go on quote unquote tour with a band, as one of those not really tours with cover stuff. And so I got out then I jumped back into Georgia State a few years later and studied music. And I had I was probably a sophomore, junior-ish, and I'd taken all the core classes. Basically, all I needed to do was a few here and there history classes and a bunch of performance segments and stuff like chorus or jazz ensemble or things you were required to be in. And then I realized that was going to qualify me basically, unless I was an exceptional performer, to teach. And teaching music is not my strong point, so I bailed from that, and then I went and did various things for a while, and then I came back and actually went into business school at Georgia State, and ended up taking some computer information systems and programming and discrete math and economics and finance and all that good stuff. So I actually have about 2/3 of a degree in music and about the same in business, but no piece of paper.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And as you made those decisions, or maybe where you look at back now, was that a good decision? Was that, it seemed like you're filling out what you really want to do, and you're moving towards that quicker than maybe some other people might.
It was all part of the grand plan.
Yeah.
I wish I could say that, but it was just kind of going where I thought at the moment. And it short story to kind of circle back to your question before was that I was doing music pretty much all the time up through 2000, but that was still requiring me for a lot of periods of time to do various day jobs, from working in a factory that made band saws to a shipping department at a ham radio store to working in my dad's insurance agency on and off. And, bless him, but none of those things were really thrilling. Mm-hmm. And the gigging musician situation is not generally as lucrative or stable as the few folks that can make money in music, like from licensing, songwriting, and or being one of the top performing and recording artists, there are definite strata there between one segment and the other. And the gigging musician is a very hard bitten sort of profession to be in.
And you mentioned like around 2000, I guess things started getting better in terms of financially. What was that change that happened there?
Yeah, good and bad, but financially very good. Actually, I had I met a young lady, and we refer to her on the podcast as the Admiral, but it's the lovely Tanya, who I'm still with, and I met her while I was playing a gig, and turned out we started dating. And at one point, because she is a paralegal, she said, "We've got this thing we need to do. It's called an electronic brief, and we're trying to hyperlink all these documents so we can give it to the court so that they can conveniently see what sort of points we're trying to make and what we have to back those up. And our other vendor is conflicted, so can't do it. So can you do this?" And I said, "Well, sure." And this was after the computer information system thing at Georgia State and a little bit of programming. And I said, sure. And then I got kind of into the planning the thing, and I started realizing if I wanted to do this manually, because this was just a little before, as far as I know, before Acrobat started allowing you to link things together and do it the way we later did. So I was going to do it in HTML, and not to geek out too much, but short story, it would have been like copying the Bible by hand to do all this link coding and all that stuff. So I ended up writing a program that I could input, what exhibit number, how many pages there were, and it would spit out all the code to do it in HTML. And I did a little autoplay disk. And anyway, that turned into a decade and a half of doing multimedia for large scale litigation. So that has paid the bills a lot more and allowed me to turn down a lot of gigs, and the power of no is a beautiful thing. So, but after that, around 2015-ish, I guess, I said, that's great, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here as a creative, and it is time to fold this up and turn these multimedia skills into more of a creative multimedia thing.
Okay. That's cool. I love that you talked about the power of no.
Yes.
Why don't you unpack that for us a little bit? Because I think maybe some of us had heard that, but what did that mean for you?
Yeah, just in my situation, being able to first of all, not to have to do gigs that don't pay any money, because that's the only, because I'm focused, because I'm not focused on just doing music strictly and with nothing else in the pot. I am able to turn down gigs that are a lot too much work and not enough reward. And that includes like corporate gigs and, gigs where there's no money and it's a cover band or what have you. And it allows me to focus on like taking the ones I want, like jazz festivals and I just booked for next July a thing at Callenwald Amphitheater here in Atlanta for my band. And so I can take the ones that are good and not have to deal with the ones that are not. And I found also, just to take a slight detour, it kind of ties in, but I'm doing a lot of freelancing on Upwork now, the online platform where freelancers find clients and vice versa.
Okay.
And I spent like $25 on a little course on how to do better in that regard. And the power of no kind of ties into me there, because one of the things I gave out was don't underprice yourself and don't compete with the people that are doing the rock bottom commoditized, $5-10 an hour thing. You position yourself as different. And if a client says, well, can you do it for less than your hourly rate? You say, no, we can narrow down the scope of what you want and try and reduce it that way. But this is what I'm worth, and this is what I charge. And it's fine. It's not for everybody. If you can't afford it, you can get somebody that you can't afford, but this is what I charge and this is what I'm worth. So, and I found that once people, as that little course said, once people want to get the thing booked and get somebody to fill the job and they believe you're the person, price is a weak objection. So that ability to say, no, that's what I'm worth, or no, really, I don't want to take this job. I'm going to try and find the next thing that comes along. That's been a blessing to me.
That's it. Yeah, that's good. I like that. How about to the counter argument? So, well, I'm not making enough money yet. I got to say yes to everything to try to, get more clients or get people in. How do you kind of square that with this idea of saying no more often?
That's a good question. That has kind of occurred to me as I said that, but I think in my case, maybe the diversity of my background has kind of, the litigation multimedia thing kind of tailed off for one thing, that allowed me to, a lot of those clients were still asking for work. So I didn't have to roll everything up in a day and just start from scratch. So there's that. And on the other hand, I would think, and from some experience, that maybe I've just been fortunate, but now when I'm saying no, things seem to pop back in there from a source that's tenable to work for. And I would just suggest if you want to pay the rent, you want to be cognizant of not getting in a hole, but maybe you can say no and you can redouble your efforts with the desirable clients that you want to get. And it's true. I've found that you find there are is it the Pareto principle or one of those things, but the 20% or 10% of clients that are really problematic and try and cheap out and all that sort of thing are the ones that cause 80% of your headaches.
Yeah.
So saying no to that select group is a beautiful thing.
Okay, that's cool. Well, I have to think you have some stories from being a musician and doing all these gigs over the years.
Most I can't repeat, but there are a lot of those. Oh boy, they're either very blue or innocuous.
Or how about maybe performing with somebody that we might know about? Did you have any of those opportunities?
Oh, sure, and a lot of that came as actually before I joined the Recording Academy. A lot of my resume on the if you go to the About section on my site, it's actually a lot of those are one hits that we did at award shows for the Atlanta Recording Academy. So for, James Brown, CeeLo, Sleepy Brown, Bo Diddley. I don't know if I said James Brown or not when he was still with us. The Michaels, Bolton, and McDonald. So I got to play with all those folks like at least once in those shows. A lot of the rest of the time, it's stuff I've produced for me or my friends that none of your listeners would probably be familiar with.
Okay. I guess what's the difference of that, like performing with one of those people than producing your own?
A little more nerves, but they've all those folks were the band, and I was not the band leader for most of those. When the high profile, very competent band, so that makes you feel comfortable. But I did remember when we played with Michael McDonald, because I love his stuff and his playing and singing. And I figured, well, he's a keyboardist and singer, and we were doing a tribute actually to Trisha Yearwood, who was receiving an award, and he was doing one of her songs. And I thought, okay, well, he's going to be playing piano and singing, and I'm going to be doing like some strings on keyboard or something, just in the background. And he came in and from Nashville in jeans and flip flops for the sound check, and he was just going to sing. So that it was all me on piano for Michael McDonald there, and that made me a little nervous, but it worked out fine.
Oh, that's cool. I can imagine that.
Yeah, didn't help when the bass player was razzing me during the sound check about don't get nervous or anything.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that.
Love those guys.
Huh. All right, well, maybe we'll come up a little closer to where you're at today. It sounds like you went through, explored different ways, different paths along the way. Now you seem to be more focused on, I guess I would classify the things you really want to do.
Yeah, and actually, I came up with the Recording Academy thing just off the top of my head, but I'm overlooking a couple of significant and related things that happened starting about 2010. I went with my father, who'd always as I mentioned, he's born in 29, so he's now 88, I believe. And he'd always wanted to go to China. In 2010, he finally said, my stepmom wasn't in good enough shape to go and travel that much. So he said, "Hey, Bradford, you want to go with me to China and do this river cruise and do some touring around?" And I said, "Sure." And so we went over there and we flew about, I think I figured like 38, 40 hours total between Atlanta and San Fran and Narita Airport and Beijing and all these other places to and from and within China. And I told Dad that, I said, "Man, you got to get up and walk every so often on the plane because you don't want to get any of those DVT things or whatever in your legs." And so I was aware of that. And he got up and walked around plenty. And we got back to the States, and I actually was at a recording academy seminar the next day, and my foot started hurting. And lo and behold, thankfully, Pops didn't have any ill effects from the trip, but I got a blood clot in my heel.
Wow.
So I had to take the blood thinners for about a long time, about 1.5 years, I think. And about that time, I decided that, quality of life needs to be a prime consideration, and not just, as long as I can make the rent. If I have trouble making the rent, I'm going to narrow maybe my luxury items, except for the essential. But about that time, I, made that decision that I really want to focus on quality of life and enjoying it, because, no telling what could happen the next day or next week. And about that time, Tanya came home from work, and one of our friends, who is a sailor, was looking at a boat up here on Lake Lanier near Atlanta. And he had taken his wife to try out the boat, and she was not very much into it and kind of nixed that idea. So he gave Tanya permission to tell me that it was for sale. And basically about 2 days from then, I had written a check to the folks and owned a new sailboat. So that was a big change.
Now, was this something you sailed before? Or was this just?
Yeah, we'd taken some lessons. It's ASA, American Sailing Association, something like that, like 101 and 102 courses in Florida and in Puerto Rico, but without doing it for reals in between, it kind of dissipates the knowledge pretty quickly. And I think especially for Tanya, because I was constantly reading about sailing stuff and still do, so it's a little fresher for me, but still not having the practical experience in between, a sailing class a year or two apart, you kind of get rusty. So I was somewhat of a noob when I got the boat, and we'd had little boats on freshwater, little runabout or pontoon boats when I was coming along, but this is the first one I owned and the first sailboat. And we actually ended up moving it from Lake Lanier down to St. Pete in Florida, and taking the mast out, putting it on a semi truck and taking it down there. And so now she is in the saltwater, and that's allowed me to sail a lot the last, I think since 2013. I sailed about 9 months up on the lake. And then in 2013, we moved her down to St. Pete, and I think I've done about 4,000 miles since then. And that's at 6 miles an hour.
Wow.
So a lot of hours.
Well, you brought up this concept of quality of life and improving the quality of life. And I'm sure everybody out there would, if you ask, hey, do you want a higher quality of life? Everybody say yes. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, for sure. How do we, if you have any insights on this, how do you, or maybe how did you go about, working that out? So what does this mean to have a higher quality of life or a better quality of life? Sounds like sailing became part of that for you. Absolutely.
And I guess depending on who you ask, there's competing thoughts, just like when you talk to various financial or self-improvement gurus. You have the restrictive folks that say you need to cut your needs, and then there are the abundance folks that in various ways say you do X, Y, and Z and it'll just happen. And I haven't quite gotten the latter one to work exactly yet, but I have tried to limit the number of frivolous stuff that I do. So a lot of things that I own serve if they're toys, they serve a business purpose too, other than the boat. Like electronic video and audio gadgets, they serve to support the multimedia work that I do for clients. And as it turns out, this whole combination, which may not be everybody's bag or situation, I should say, in regular person speak, but it may not be the same for everybody, but I've been able to parlay this recording academy, governorship and the sort of prestige with that, and the Multimedia Ninja podcast and the boat thing into this sort of persona that not only helps, it's not only fun, but it helps, with clientele and stuff, because if they say, well, we can get Jim to do our video editing or motion graphics, and that's Jim, or we can get this crazy guy here that's sailing around the world doing motion graphics and a podcast and appears to be a living large and potentially entertaining fellow. And so that has reflected well on the client acquisition, and it kind of couples up with that ability to say no, because I think a lot of people you get the prestige factor in there, whether well deserved or not. And I won't go there, but you couple that with the ability to say no, and it's a force multiplier, to be sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. I could see that in you. And you bring that up, and that's kind of how I met you. I met you briefly at the conference. We talked just a little bit. Yeah. But you had, of course, you were the top person in terms of the posts on the feed. You mentioned that. I saw, then I read your history, and I'm like, this guy has some interesting stuff going on. So the very reason I reached out to connect with you was exactly what you're talking about. This guy has multiple things going on. Looks like he's, doing this and doing that, and seems to be enjoying himself. So let's talk to this guy.
I don't know if I can say on the show social media hoe, but that's what Tanya says jokingly. And that's really a key component for me is, doing the Instagram, the Facebook, and actually at Podcast Movement, the little app where I was managed to crawl into the number one spot there on points, which equals activity. I really got into that because I signed up for the conference and I wanted to I don't want to say take my podcasting to the next level. That would just be wrong. That hasn't been used at all. But I wanted to improve things, and I thought, rightly as it turns out, that it'd be a great experience. But despite how I might sound now or on the podcast or, aboard the boat or something, I am actually a little introverted. So I was concerned, am I going to go out there? How am I going to talk to people and meet people? And I saw they had this app, and I said, whoa, great. This is perfect, because I can actually meet people before I meet them. And that's just how I got really working that thing. Once I just started it, it's kind of gamified too, that little app. So once you get going, it's addictive.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty cool. I love how you're bringing these different pieces of your life and things you want to do, and, knowing some of your own strengths and weaknesses, and then leveraging those things to make, I guess it sounds like, to make things more enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely been having a better time the last few years. Not that it was bad before, but we just sailed to Cuba and around New Year's, and that was the latest adventure up until lately. But it's been a lot of fun, and nothing wrong with a little sunshine and salt air. And one thing I've been doing consciously when I wrapped up ELIT, which was my litigation support business, and going towards more freelancing creative stuff, is I've consciously, and including using Upwork as a platform, made it where I can work remotely with my laptop. And I would highly encourage anybody that's a knowledge worker or a digital content creator or editor or anything like that. That is an awesome thing as far as I'm concerned, to be location independent.
That's good. Now, just on a curious note on personal, I hear you talking about sailing and kind of that's a newer thing in your life. And I'm kind of in this place too, where you're exploring new things. So the podcast is fairly new for me. I'm a chemical engineer by trade for over 15 years. So, speaking and all this media stuff, that was not in my playbook at all.
Right.
So for sailing, what does that do for, what has it done for you? What is it like to go out and sail?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think about the benefit of it often. I didn't phrase that the way I wanted, but it occurs to me all the time that I make my living with all this technology, and I'm constantly dealing with, things breaking down. I got this new used laptop in right now because my old one 2011 MacBook Pro died, and I wanted the exact same 17-inch thing because I have certain things that I depend on certain things for. And so I got this sitting here right behind me, waiting to be turned into a Franken-Mac. But anyway, I'm dealing with this technology all the time, and digital recording and video editing and videography and all this stuff. And sometimes helping Tanya with troubleshooting, networks and stuff like that. And so I'm really starting to long for simplicity. And I kind of did before. The upshot of the band touring back in the mid-90s is the main thing that concerns this. But we toured about 3 years in one of those little 15-passenger vans with a trailer. And it was like the loudest band I have ever been around, let alone in. So I really, and being in close proximity with great people, but being in super close proximity all that time made me where I really like to get zenned out and have quiet and be alone. And I'm an only child anyway, so I think I take to that aloneness. So getting out on the boat, to answer your question, really gets me in this sort of zen, simple sort of zone where at least when you can turn the engine off, you got nothing but the sails and the wind and the lines and the lapping of the waves and all that cool stuff. And it's a major tonic.
That sounds good. That sounds like I want to be there right now.
It's not terrible, but you go down there on the right day and you can definitely come sailing.
All right.
I only sail on days that end in Y, so we got to choose carefully.
Right. We'll pick them carefully. Yeah. How about some other foundations in your life that seem to bring you happiness, joy that you found throughout your living? What other foundations might you have that you'd like to share with us?
I think, good friends is always a given, and that includes the Admiral Tanya. We are not officially hitched, but she is, besides being my partner, is my dearest friend, and having people you can count on and confide in, that's huge. And a strong family. My gets complicated. So you want a backstory? I have recently come to have 3 moms. But,
all right.
So I'm adopted, besides being an only child. So who I consider mom is the mom Joyce that raised me. My dad got divorced when I was about 18 or something ish. And, so I have my stepmom. My mom Joyce is no longer with us. Lucy, my stepmom, is. And then being adopted, I actually found, or vice versa, my birth mom about 3 years ago, which is really cool. So it turns out I grew up as an only child. And then when I was around 17, 18, I got a stepbrother, Derek, who's very cool and very different from me. And then, about 3 years ago when I found my birth mom, I found I have 4 siblings in Michigan. So
wow.
from only child to, having 5 siblings is definite change, but that's all been super cool.
That's really neat. I've actually had a couple of my guests that have been adopted as well, and they shared different parts of that story.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if anyone had any difficulty with that. And I ask because people always ask me that, and I always say, not really. It really never was a factor in any way.
Yeah, actually, a couple of my guests, it was a pretty big factor in their life, and they felt that some abandonment all along the way because of that, and it led to, different paths down their journey as well. So yeah, they did. So
interesting.
But you didn't feel any of that, huh?
No, I'm going to have to get those episode numbers from you to see what how they were, what they were talking there. Cause I was always surprised, and like the only, little embarrassment I've ever, tiny when I was a kid in my life about being adopted was when people would ask me if I had any trepidation about it or whatever. And I was wondering, well, should I feel funny about it? I don't feel funny.
That's interesting.
But yeah, it's been all good, but I'm definitely an introvert, definitely love my peace and quiet. So when I enjoy, for example, sailing by myself. I've probably sailed half to 3/4 of those 4,000 miles in the last few years are solo. And then, but then I also really enjoy sharing sailing with Tanya. And then occasionally I enjoy sailing with a select group of friends, one or two at a time. But definitely love the solitude.
Yeah, I could see that. There's an appeal for that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Bradford, why don't we come up a little bit more to where you're at today and what you're doing? And we're getting pieces of that already, but why don't you bring us up to speed?
Well, I more recently, of course, we went to Podcast Movement, and that has actually caused me to rethink my podcast a little bit, because I started out with audio, and I decided, since my podcast is about multimedia production, and also because I heard having like a YouTube, I won't say copy of your podcast, but like a parallel thing on YouTube is good for traffic. But in addition to that, I thought, well, but given that I'm also talking about multimedia production, I should start doing video every episode to go with the audio. And that has been a seriously heavy lift. So, and I was at Podcast Movement, and I noticed all these folks, in hallways and in their hotel rooms and whatever, they were just bringing out the Zoom or whatever and producing, interviews and recording stuff right on the spot. And I thought, man, that is really freeing compared to what I'm doing. They can just do stuff right there on the spot. They don't have to think about sync audio for the video and doing the video editing and stuff. And there's when we heard some of those top of the line award winning podcast excerpts and stuff, I paid attention to the audio quality of that. And I'm from an audio background, so I'm thinking, wow, this is something I'd like to pursue more. And so it turns out, to tie in another recent thing, last week we had the Hurricane Irma issue, and I actually just went and did an audio only podcast of about 5 minutes that was much better produced on the audio end, but I didn't even release a video. And that was due to the combination of going to Podcast Movement, getting a new piece of software, which often stirs the pot a little bit, and then having the wondering whether the storm was going to total our boat in St. Pete or not.
So why podcasting at all? I mean, you're in these other things. How did podcasting even come about for you?
I actually forget. I think it's one of those things. I guess, let's see. I can probably trace it in that this is boat related, I think, because once I moved the boat down to St. Pete, I have a 2003 GMC Yukon that is well worn now, but is paid for. And I decided, since I have an 8-hour commute now to get to the boat, I would take out the factory stereo in there and put a little Bluetooth stereo in there. And once I did that, I started checking out some podcasts, and starting with the Digital Convergence podcast, which is multimedia related. Then Podcast Answer Man, Cliff Ravenscraft. And I think between all that, that's what kind of what kickstarted that. I figured, I'm doing multimedia production. Podcasting's definitely a part of that, and a great way to showcase your multimedia production and establish authority in that sphere and all that. And so I think that's pretty much where that genesis came from. And then after 25 or so episodes, which we're now on 68 is the next one. But after a number of those, I decided, I'm doing multimedia production. I should do a video version. So now we have this whole complex video open comic book animated graphics thing on the video thing, which in and of itself takes me 2 hours just to put the little inserts for each week and to set that thing up to render. So very proud of it, but I'm definitely interested to see where we're going. Oh, and I do have actually, I can't say anything about it yet, not for secrecy, but because I don't know what exact shape it's taken, but I have a podcast or some sort of show on sailing that I've spoken to one of the cruising magazines. That's cruising sailing, not cruising like being downtown at midnight. But one of the cruising magazines has an online version, and they are talking about me doing a show on there that would essentially kind of be stupid sailing mistakes. And they turned me on to a terrestrial radio network that is interested in doing that with audio. So that's all awesome. And I got to email the one guy back after we chat today, but I don't know exactly what shape that's going to pop out in, but those are some really cool things I'm excited about. And those, I don't know, I can't quantify how much income might be in those, but they, a little bit, enough to justify the time spent and have that much more passive income doing something I love talking about. That's super exciting to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, making money and doing things that you love and love to talk about. I mean,
yeah.
That's why we're here, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Well, great. And so if someone wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that? And what would they be reaching out to you for? Multimedia, when I hear that multimedia stuff.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm actually narrowing it down, which is another related topic we could go into on quality of life, but I'll save that for later. But I am getting to, along with the Zen thing and the peace and quiet, there's a certain amount of the technology and being so diverse, which is what the multimedia ninja thing is about. I may not be a surgical scalpel about every discipline, but I know a little to a great deal about almost every major app within Adobe Creative Cloud. So video editing, motion graphics, Illustrator, Photoshop, Audition and Pro Tools and Ableton and such for audio and record production. And so short stories, I just noticed I got a call or a contact on Upwork about web design, and it's probably a larger contract, but I politely declined that. And I went to look and see if I can take web design off of my profile there to narrow it down. So don't call me for web design, but, any sort of audio editing or production, video editing, some cases shooting, motion graphics, which, like titles or, special effects, that's great fun. But if the more I'm more and more interested in niching down to the audio production and writing that goes with it. Like I have a couple of books, one sailing related and one multimedia related that I'm getting ready to pop out here. But so if somebody wanted to contact me, video editing, motion graphics, and audio and music production would be the optimal things that I'm most interested in doing now. And the best way to do that is at the multimedianinja.com website. I have a contact form there, and it's actually, make sure you go through the spam filter and should get to me and all that good stuff.
Okay, wonderful. We'll be sure to post that for those of you out there who want to know more. So it'll be on both the podcast and the website. So we'll make sure we do that.
And a small nugget I would just add to prospective multimedia ninjas or web-oriented people or whatever is I'm really an almost religious believer in, aside from the multimedianinja.com, everything else I do is at Bradford Rogers, like Instagram, Twitter. I'm a big believer that if you go to, at Bob Jameson on Twitter, you don't want to look on Instagram and see, it's Robert Jameson or the official, and having the URL. I do have a BradfordRogers.com too, which is kind of my personal, but so you can't go wrong at just putting in Bradford Rogers with a ROGERS and Google or whatever and media, and you'll probably get me.
Okay. Definitely. Okay. Well, as we're wrapping up here, I guess I want to hear, maybe as you reflect upon your journey, your life, and maybe someone out there is kind of in an earlier path than you, kind of trying to figure things out and, having some successes and maybe some failures along the way. I guess, what would you leave that person with?
Well, one of my overall things, and this may sort of answer your question in the way you were looking for, or maybe not, but when musicians, for example, ask me, what is the most important thing? And I always say, at this point in time, besides, learning basic theory and ear training and playing an instrument or voice or something, the next thing I would say is know about computers. Because if you are in a lot of the service industry jobs are going away, from driving trucks to what have you, probably pilots before too long, and being able to have some computer knowledge in general and and having some digital, I would say digital content creation or editing skills. I'm a little biased, but those things are going to be hard to replace in the medium term. And they're also can help you with location independence, which I think is you don't have to work away from the home, but being able to is a beautiful thing in my book. So that would be my nugget is know as much about computers and digital content creation and manipulation tools as possible. And I think you will find a path that is flexible and useful.
That's good. I love that practical. Yeah, you're right. Sometimes they might say, "Oh, believe in yourself," those type of things. But I love the practicality about it. That's good.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't go philosophical at all on that.
No, that's good.
I could say less is more.
Yeah. Well, great. I really appreciate you spending time here with us, Bradford. Sure. It's been a ride. I really enjoyed it. And if I'm out in Atlanta, I'm gonna have to look you up, and maybe we'll find some time to go sailing.
Yeah, and if you're in the St. Pete area or going to be, by all means, let me know, because I plan to spend more and more time there.
Nothing on the schedule right now, but who knows?
Right.
And if you're ever in Houston, then look me up in Houston. We'll find something to do.
Yeah, I will, and glad you made it out okay over there.
Yeah, likewise. Well, you take care, and thank you again.
You too, Jason. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, a big thank you for everyone out there, and thank you to Bradford for sharing time with us. You can find Bradford if you're interested in finding more about him. He can be found on the multimedianinja.com. That's the multimedianinja.com. And also, if you search Bradford Rogers, Bradford Rogers, on most platforms, you'll find him. I guess a quick by way of announcement is that we'll be diving deeper into story in this coming month, talking about the story of stories, as well as several of the guests upcoming. Dive a little bit more into the personal story and the value of either writing or reading, develop their own personal story. So with that, you guys have a great week. Be sure to keep tuning in, subscribe, share with a friend. Always welcome to visit the website at storyhinge.com. There you'll find a little more information. And I'm starting to develop a few other things as well. Developing the website a little bit better to have a little more value for you out there, as well as moving a little bit more on social media platforms and specifically YouTube, and developing some videos and developing some other things to go along with this podcast content as well. And one last thing, we are going to end Storyhinge a little bit different today. We're ending with one of Bradford's songs called All Talk, No Action, where he co-wrote, produced it. It's the flute, is doing this backup singing. So we're going to end with his music today to give you a little taste of Bradford Rogers. You guys have a great week. We will catch you next week.
I've been watching you, and you've been watching me. There's nothing else to see. It's so nice talking to ya. Your smile's been telling me that it would like to see alone, just you and me. No sense just talking to ya. What big eyes you have. What a star you have. Your looks just killing me. Let's see if you're all talk and no action, 'cause you've been talking about it all night long, singing the taxi sassy song. Time to find out before too long if you're all talk, no action. I've been telling you, and you've been telling me, there's nothing else to see. No sense just talking daydreams. We have a chance to see, together, you and me, we could make history and maybe do some night things. What big eyes you have. What a star you have. Your looks just killing me. Let's see if you're all talk and no action, 'cause you've been talking about it all night long, singing the taxi sassy song. Time to find out before too long if you're all talk, no action. you